The night was dark and silent, the kind of night where the forest seemed alive with whispers. Above the trees, the faint glow of a burning ship lit the sky. Pieces of metal fell like fire rain, crackling as they hit the ground from the wreck. A young alien girl stumbled out. Her legs shook, her face was pale, and blood dripped slowly from her forehead. She tried to stand tall, but her body swayed as if the earth itself was pulling her down. Her memory was already fading, as if someone had stolen it from her mind. She did not know her name. She did not know why she was here. She only knew one thing: she was in pain. She staggered through the broken trees, each step heavy. The sound of the burning ship behind her grew distant. Her breathing came fast, shallow, and she pressed her hand against her head. Her vision blurred, and every shadow around her seemed like a monster waiting to strike. She fell to her knees, crawling through leaves. The forest was not silent anymore. Around her eyes began to glow in the dark. Dozens of them, shining like tiny moons. She froze, her weak body trembling. The sound of paws crushing the ground filled her ears. A low growl echoed, deep and dangerous. She tried to speak, but her voice was broken. Just a whisper, "Please, don't." The words felt heavy. She shut her eyes tight, waiting for the end, but the end did not come. The growl stopped. The glowing eyes did not move closer. Instead, the shadows circled her. Keeping a strange distance, they were dogs, wild, hungry, scarred by survival, yet they did not attack. They only watched, curious. The girl fell again, her face hitting the soil. The world spun, and her body wanted to give up, but the sound of sniffing noses surrounded her. Warm breath brushed against her skin. One dog licked her hand. Another pawed at her side gently. They were not killers. Tonight, they were guardians. She opened her eyes weakly. Seeing them for the first time, their ribs showed through thin fur. Their eyes carried the same hunger she felt in her stomach. They were strays, abandoned by the world just like her. In that moment, something invisible passed between them, a silent bond. She was no longer alone. The night stretched on. The dogs lay around her in a circle, keeping her warm against the cold air. Every time she shivered, one of them pressed closer. She did not understand why. She did not even understand who she was, but her heart whispered that these creatures had chosen her. When morning came, the burning wreck was only smoke. The girl woke weakly, still surrounded by her strange protectors. Her stomach growled with pain. She tried to crawl, but her legs refused. She would have starved, but one of the dogs dropped a piece of old meat near her, torn from somewhere in the forest. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She hesitated, then ate. Tears rolled down her face as the taste filled her mouth. It was not food fit for her kind. Not food she would have ever eaten before, but now it was life. She was alive because of them. As the day passed, her thoughts drifted like smoke. She searched inside her mind for memories. But they were gone, empty, like a broken book with missing pages. She only remembered fire, pain, and now the dogs. They became her only truth. When night fell again, she curled in the dirt. Pressing close to the pack, the forest howled with the cries of predators. But none dared approach. The dogs stood guard, teeth bared, eyes glowing in the moonlight. The girl drifted into sleep, her heart whispering that she should not be alive. Yet, somehow, she was. In the distance, the wind carried faint voices, searching, hunting. But she could not hear them. Her world had shrunk into hunger, pain, and the gentle protection of wild animals. The accident had taken her memory. It had taken her family, her past, and her future. Yet in that broken night, in the ashes of fire, she found life in the most unexpected way. Not in her people, not in her kind, but in the glowing eyes of strays who had nothing to give. The story of her survival had only begun, The forest became her world. A strange and cruel world where the girl had no past. No name and no memory. Only the pain in her body reminded her she was alive. And only the strays, those half-wild dogs, reminded her she was not completely alone. At first, she thought they would kill her. She was weak, broken, and slow, but they never did. Instead, they moved around her like silent shadows. Sometimes growling at the dark, sometimes chasing away creatures she never saw. Their eyes glowed at night. But their hearts carried something she could not explain. The girl followed them because she had no choice. When she crawled, they waited. When she stumbled, they circled back. It was as if they had already accepted her into their pack. She did not speak their language, but she began to understand their signs. When one barked sharply, danger was near. When one whined softly, food was close. They shared scraps with her, bones and rotten meat, things she never would have touched before. Yet now she ate them because hunger was stronger than pride. Her hands shook as she tore at the food. She hated herself for eating like an animal, but each bite gave her the strength to live one more day. The dogs did not judge her. They only watched with quiet eyes at night when the cold wrapped around her thin body. The dogs pressed against her sides. Their warmth kept her from freezing. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, her hand resting on a dog's fur, and for a moment she felt safe. Days passed. Though she did not know how many, the forest blurred into endless trees. Her mind was empty, a blank sky with no stars. But every now and then, pieces tried to return, flashes of burning metal. Voices screaming, a name on her lips she could not remember. Whenever she reached for it, the memory vanished, leaving her lost. The dogs became her family. There was a large one, scarred and strong, who always walked in front. He was the leader. She felt his eyes on her often, as if he was testing her, asking if she truly belonged. Another was smaller, limping from an old wound. It always stayed close to her, sometimes brushing against her leg as if afraid she would disappear. The girl gave them silent names in her heart. She called the leader Fang, the smaller one Shadow, and the rest she named by the way they moved, the fast one, the quiet one, the fierce one. They were her world now. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, she saw Fang bring down a rabbit. The pack rushed to it, tearing into flesh, her stomach twisted with hunger, but she did not move. She thought they would not share. But then Shadow dragged a piece to her feet, laying it there as if it belonged to her. Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "Thank you." Though she knew they did not understand, yet Shadow wagged its tail, and in that moment, she felt less like a stranger. But the forest was cruel, not kind. One night, a pack of wolves came. Their howls cut through the silence, sharper than knives. The girl froze, fear gripping her heart. The strays stood, teeth bared, tails stiff. They were ready to fight. The wolves circled, their eyes hungry. The girl pressed her back against a tree, her body shaking. She could barely breathe. The strays lunged, snapping and growling. The fight was brutal. Fur, teeth, blood. The girl screamed, her voice raw. She wanted to help, but she was too weak, too broken. When the wolves finally fled, the strays stood bloody but alive. Fang limped, his shoulder torn. Shadow lay beside her, breathing heavy. She held its head in her arms, tears running down her cheeks. "Don't die," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." Shadow licked her hand weakly, then closed its eyes. She did not sleep that night. She sat awake, guarding them as they had guarded her. For the first time, she felt she belonged not as a prisoner of memory, but as one of them. Days after the battle, she began to change. She no longer crawled. She walked, slow but steady. She no longer cried. For food, she searched with them, learned from them. She bent low, watching how they moved. Copying their steps, she drank from rivers when they drank. She hid when they hid. The girl was no longer a lost soul in the forest. She was part of a pack, but deep inside, something still stirred. Her heart whispered that she had once been more than this. That there was a name she had forgotten. A world beyond the trees. The dogs gave her survival, but the shadows of her past waited like hunters, waiting for the moment to strike, and so the girl lived between two truths, one in the wild, with her loyal pack, and one in the broken fragments of her mind. She did not know which would save her, which would destroy her. The forest had become her world. She thought no one else existed beyond the trees. For days and nights she lived with the strays, crawling through mud, drinking from rivers, and sleeping beside their warm bodies. She believed this was her life. Now forgotten and hidden from everything, but fate had other plans. One stormy evening, the sky cracked with thunder, rain poured down like knives. Soaking the ground, the girl shivered under a tree. Her weak arms wrapped around her knees. The dogs huddled close, their fur dripping wet. She closed her eyes, wishing for warmth. Through the sound of rain, footsteps came, slow, steady, heavy. She opened her eyes, her breath caught. A figure moved between the trees, holding a lantern that glowed like fire against the storm. A man, he wore an old coat, patched and torn from years of use. His boots splashed in the mud as he walked. His face was hidden under the shadow of his hood. He had been walking home through the forest path, never expecting to find what he was about to see. The man stopped, his lantern shaking slightly. His eyes widened at the sight before him. A young girl, filthy and broken, surrounded by wild dogs. Her hair clung to her face. Her eyes glowed with fear and confusion. For a moment, she looked more beast than human. The dogs growled, low and dangerous, circling her protectively. The man froze, his breath slow. He knew one wrong move could end his life, yet he did not turn away. Something in the girl's trembling body pulled him closer. The girl pressed herself against the tree, her body shaking. She whispered something, her voice almost lost in the storm. "Help me." The words were weak, broken, but real. The man's heart clenched. He lifted his lantern slowly, raising his other hand in peace. "Easy," he said softly, his voice calm. "I won't hurt you." The dogs growled louder, their teeth flashing in the light, but they did not leap. They only stood their ground. The man crouched down. Lowering himself to their level, he looked into the girl's eyes. They were filled with pain, but also something else, something he could not name. She looked lost, more lost than anyone he had ever seen. The girl tried to move, but her legs gave out. She collapsed into the mud. The dogs barked in panic, circling tighter. One even lunged forward, teeth bared at the man. But the man did not back away. Instead, he set his lantern gently on the ground and reached out his hand. The dogs froze. Their growls echoed, but none of them attacked. The girl lifted her face, her eyes glassy with tears. For a moment, silence ruled the storm. And then one dog stepped aside, just a single step, as if granting him permission. The man moved forward slowly. He slid his arms under the girl's weak body, lifting her as gently as if she were made of glass. She was light, too light. Her ribs pressed against his chest. She smelled of dirt, blood, and rain. The girl wanted to resist, but her body had no strength left. She closed her eyes, trusting the warmth of his arms for the first time since the accident. She felt something more than survival. She felt human touch. The dogs watched, silent now. Their eyes followed as the man carried her through the rain. They did not attack. They did not follow. They only stood in the shadows. Their howls rose once as if saying farewell. The man looked back, once. Meeting Fang's glowing eyes, he felt a chill. Those were not normal dogs. They had guarded her, chosen her, and now they were giving her to him. It felt like a warning and a gift. He carried her all the way to his small cabin at the edge of the forest. The storm followed, lightning flashing across the sky. The girl stirred weakly in his arms, whispering words he did not understand. Strange sounds, a strange language, like pieces of a forgotten dream. He laid her down near the fire inside, wrapping a blanket around her. She shook as if the cold lived in her bones. Her lips moved, forming broken words. Don't. Take me back. He frowned, not understanding, but he saw the fear in her eyes. The man fed her broth, spoon by spoon. She swallowed like someone who had not eaten real food in years. Her eyes followed him with a strange mixture of trust and terror. She looked at him as if he was both her savior and her jailer. When the storm ended, silence filled the cabin. The man sat near her, watching as she fell into restless sleep. Outside, in the distance, faint howls echoed. The strays had not abandoned her. Completely, they lingered in the shadows, waiting. The man knew one thing as he looked at the fragile girl wrapped in his blanket. She was not ordinary. She was not from this world. And now, her fate had fallen into his hands. The cabin was small, built of old wood and stone, but it was warmer than anything the girl had felt since the accident. A fire burned softly in the corner, its flames chasing away the cold shadows of the storm. The man placed a blanket over her trembling body, and for the first time in many nights, she did not sleep on dirt. The girl's eyes fluttered open. She looked around in fear. Her body tensed, as if ready to crawl back into the forest. But the warmth of the fire held her still. She touched the blanket with her weak fingers, confused by the softness. Her lips trembled. As if the simple comfort was too much for her broken heart, the man moved slowly, careful not to frighten her. He poured water into a cup and held it out. "Drink," he said gently. His voice was steady, calm, not demanding. The girl stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes were wild, like a trapped animal, but thirst won. She reached out, her hand shaking. She drank greedily, water running down her chin. Her stomach growled loudly. The man stood, walking to a pot near the fire. He filled a bowl with thin soup, vegetables, and broth. He held it to her lips. She hesitated, then took a spoon from him. Her hands fumbled. Spilling half of it, she ate quickly, like she feared it would vanish, her eyes never leaving his face. He noticed how she ate like the strays had taught her, fast, desperate, not caring about manners. His heart ached. What had she suffered before he found her? How long had she lived without kindness? When she finished, she leaned back weakly. The warmth of food filled her. Her body relaxed. And she whispered something strange, words not of his language he did not understand. But her tone was soft, grateful. He gave her a nod, pretending he did. The dogs had followed her, even here. Outside the cabin, their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. They sat in silence, watching through the cracks, guarding her even now. The man felt uneasy at first, but he also respected them without them. She would never have survived. Days passed, the girl began to recover. Her cuts healed slowly. Her skin lost the blue tint of cold. She walked carefully around the cabin, her bare feet tapping on the wooden floor. She touched objects with curiosity. Table, the chair, the shelves, things that seemed new to her. It was as if she was learning the world for the first time. Yet her memory did not return. When the man asked her name, she only shook her head, her eyes filled with pain. She did not know who she was. Sometimes at night, she would whisper strange words in her sleep, crying quietly. The man would hear, but he never woke her. He only sat nearby, keeping watch. One evening, he found her staring at the fire, her eyes distant. "Do you remember something?" he asked. She blinked, confused, then touched her head. "Fire," she whispered softly, screaming. Then nothing. Her hands trembled. She shook her head, tears falling. The man reached out. Resting a hand on her shoulder, she flinched at first, but then stilled. She let his hand stay. Trust was not easy, but it was growing. She began helping. With small tasks, carrying water, gathering wood, sweeping the floor at first. She moved clumsily, but she learned quickly. She wanted to be useful, to repay the kindness she did not understand, every time the man smiled at her work. Her heart fluttered with something she could not name. Still, fear lived inside her. When strangers passed the cabin road, she hid, crouching. In the shadows like a hunted creature, her eyes would widen, her breath quicken. Don't. Let them see me, she begged. The man did not ask why. He simply nodded. Closing the door and keeping her safe. At night, the cabin was quiet, but her dreams were not. Sometimes she screamed in her sleep, speaking in that strange tongue. The man would rush to her side, shaking her gently. She would wake with tears. Clutching his shirt, whispering, "Don't let them take me back." He held her until she calmed. Though he had no idea who they were, the bond between them deepened. Slowly, the man no longer saw her as a stranger. She was fragile, yes, but also strong in ways he could not understand. She had survived things no one should, and yet she still lived. She was no ordinary girl. He felt it in his bones. One night, as snow began to fall outside, the girl sat near the fire with the man. She pointed at herself and shook her head. "No name," she whispered. Then she pointed at him. Tilting her head curiously, he hesitated, then gave his name. Softly, she repeated it clumsily, her voice quiet but filled with warmth. It was the first human word she spoke clearly. The man's heart tightened. In that moment, he realized she was no longer just someone he saved. She was becoming part of his life. But outside the cabin, in the distant woods, shadows were moving. Strange men asked questions in the nearby town. They searched for a lost survivor. And their footsteps were getting closer. The peace inside the cabin would not last forever. Winter's breath was heavy in the forest. Snow covered the ground like a blanket. The cabin stood quiet, smoke rising from its chimney. Inside, the girl warmed her hands near the fire. Her hair was cleaner now, her skin no longer pale with sickness. Yet her eyes still carried the shadows of things she could not remember. The man watched her carefully. He had given her food, clothes, and safety. But he knew one truth: her past was not gone. It was only sleeping. Sometimes he saw it in the way her eyes widened at sudden noises, or how she whispered strange words. In her dreams, that truth came closer one morning. A knock rattled the cabin door. The man froze. Visitors rarely came this deep into the woods. He opened it slightly, and two strangers stood outside. Their coats were heavy with snow, their faces sharp. Their eyes scanned the cabin behind him before they even spoke. "We're looking for someone," one of them said firmly. "A survivor from a crash. Have you seen anyone unusual?" The man's chest tightened. He shook his head calmly. "No one here but me," he answered. The strangers did not believe him. They stepped closer, peering inside. The man blocked the doorway with his body, his heart pounding. Behind him, the girl hid in the shadows. Her breath came fast, her hands shaking. She recognized their faces, not fully, but enough. A flash of fire. Men pulling her away, screams, chains. Her memories flickered like broken glass. She bit her lip to stop herself from crying out. The dogs outside began to growl. Their fur rose, their teeth flashing white against the snow. The strangers frowned. "Strange animals you have here," one muttered. The man only nodded, keeping his voice steady. "They don't like strangers." The strangers looked at him for a long time, then one smirked. "If you see anything unusual, you'll tell us," he said. His tone was not a question, it was a warning when they left. The man shut the door quickly. He turned to the girl. She was curled in the corner, trembling. Her lips moved as she whispered, "They will. Take me back." Her voice cracked, tears spilling. The man knelt beside her. "Who are they?" he asked gently, but she shook her head, clutching her temples. I don't know," she stammered, "but I feel it. They hurt me before." Her eyes widened, filled with terror. "If they find me, they will hurt me again." The man's chest ached. He reached out, placing a hand on hers. "I won't let that happen," he promised. She looked at him, searching his eyes, and for the first time, she wanted to believe. That night, she could not sleep. Every shadow in the cabin felt alive. She sat near the fire, knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes followed the door, expecting it to break open at any moment. The dogs stayed close, their eyes glowing in the firelight. They seemed to understand her fear, pressing against her legs as if to say, "We are here." The man sat across from her, silent. He watched her. He could not understand everything about her. But he knew one thing: whoever she was being hunted. Days passed, but the strangers did not return. Still, the fear did not leave. The girl jumped at every knock of the wind against the window. She begged the man not to let her go outside. Alone, the forest that once kept her alive now felt like a prison. Then the dreams grew worse. She woke, screaming, sweating, crying. In those moments, fragments of her past tore through her mind. Chains biting into her skin, voices shouting, hands pulling her away. Her eyes opened wide, and she clutched the man's shirt, whispering, They called me a weapon." The man froze at those words. "A weapon?" he asked. She nodded slowly, her face pale. "I don't remember how, but I know it's true." Her hands shook. "That's why they want me back." The truth was terrifying. If she was once used as a weapon, who would stop at nothing to claim her again? The man felt a storm inside him. He should have pushed her away. He should have told her to leave. But when he looked at her fragile, broken, clinging to life, he knew he could not. He had saved her once, and he would do it again. One evening, while chopping wood outside, he saw movement in the trees. A figure watching from the distance. Then it disappeared. His heart raced. The shadows of her past were not far anymore. They were coming. He rushed. Inside, the girl looked at him with wide eyes. She already knew. Her body trembled. "They found me," she whispered. Her voice was small, broken, but filled with truth. The dogs barked wildly outside, circling the cabin, ready to defend. The firelight flickered against the walls. Shadows danced. The man grabbed his old rifle. He had hoped never to use it again. But tonight, he might have no choice. The girl stared at him, her eyes glistening. "If they take me," she whispered, "I will lose everything again." He stepped closer, his hand firm on her shoulder. "They won't take you," he said. His voice carried no fear, only resolve. In the silence that followed, she realized something. For the first time since the accident, she did not feel alone. She had someone willing to fight for her. Someone who saw more than a broken stranger. But outside, the shadows crept closer. And the past she feared was about to knock on the door once more. Asterisk. The nights grew longer, and the forest seemed to breathe with danger. The girl no longer felt safe, even in the small cabin. Every sound outside, every crunch of snow, every snap of branches made her heart pound with fear. The man kept the fire burning, but he knew fire alone could not keep away the shadows that hunted her. The strangers were still out there. He could feel it. Their eyes had been on the cabin. Watching, waiting, they wanted the girl, and they would not stop until they had her. Inside, the girl tried to live a normal life, but her body was restless. She swept the floor, cooked small meals, even tried to mend his torn coat. Yet her hands shook every time she heard the dogs growl outside. She could not hide the truth. She was afraid. But with the fear came something else. Each day, she began to lean more on him. She watched him with quiet eyes when he worked. She listened to his voice when he spoke. And though she did not understand all his words, she felt comfort in his tone. When he smiled, her heart warmed. For the first time since the accident, she felt like she belonged to someone one evening. As snow fell thick against the window, she sat near the fire. Her eyes traced the flames. "Why? Why do you help me?" she whispered softly. Her voice trembled. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered simply, "Because you needed me." The words struck her deeply. She had been nothing but a broken soul, a girl without memory. Yet he had chosen to keep her. No one had ever done that before. Her throat tightened. And for the first time, she smiled a small, fragile smile, but real. The man saw it. And his chest filled with warmth. He had saved her body, but now he was saving her heart too. He didn't understand why. But he could no longer imagine the cabin without her. But peace never lasts. That night, the dogs barked wildly. Their howls shook the silence. The man grabbed his rifle and rushed to the door. The girl followed, her body trembling in the darkness. Shapes moved between the trees, shadows creeping closer. "They've come," she whispered. Her voice was broken. Figures stepped into the clearing, torches in hand. There were 4 of them, their faces hidden by heavy coats. One called out, "Give us the girl, and we'll leave you in peace." The man's grip tightened on the rifle. He stood firm in the doorway, blocking their view of her. "She's not yours," he shouted. His voice cut through the cold air like steel. The girl clutched his arm. "You don't understand." She whispered, "They'll kill you for me." But the man did not move. His eyes stayed locked on the figures outside. The dogs growled, standing in a line before the cabin, their teeth flashing white. The strangers moved closer, weapons glinting. In the firelight, the girl felt her breath vanish. Memories flooded her mind, flashes of chains, fire, soldiers pulling her, voices calling her a weapon. Her body shook, but then something else stirred deep inside her. Strength she thought she had lost. She stepped forward, standing beside the man. Her eyes burned with defiance. "I won't go back," she said. Her voice stronger than she believed it could be. The strangers charged. The dogs leaped first, snarling, biting. The fight erupted in chaos. The man fired his rifle, the sound echoing through the forest. One attacker fell, another swung a blade, striking the doorframe, splinters flying. The girl screamed. But instead of running, she grabbed a heavy log from the fire and swung. Flames burst as it struck one attacker's arm. He fell back, cursing. Her hands burned from the heat, but she did not let go. The man fought fiercely, but he was outnumbered. He was struck across the shoulder, blood staining his coat. He stumbled, nearly falling. The girl rushed to his side, holding him up. "Don't leave me," she begged. Her tears fell. "Please, I can't lose you too." The words ignited something in him. He stood tall again, his voice steady. "You won't," he promised. Together with the dogs, they fought like a pack. Finally, the remaining attackers fled into the night, their torches vanishing into the dark forest. The snow was stained red, the ground scattered. With broken weapons, the cabin still stood. Though its walls bore scars from the fight, the girl fell to her knees, gasping. Her body shook. But she was alive. She looked at the man, his face pale with pain. She pressed her hands to his wound. "Don't die," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't die. You're all I have." He touched her cheek weakly. Blood on his hand. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. She leaned against him, her tears falling onto his coat. In that moment, She realized what she felt Tid was not just trust, not just safety. It was love, for the first time since the accident. She had something stronger than fear. She had someone she could not lose, and though the danger was not gone, though the shadows of her past still hunted, she knew this truth: she would fight for him, just as he fought for her. The cabin was quiet after the storm of battle. The fire flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. The floor was stained with blood, and the scent of smoke hung heavy in the air. The man leaned against the wall, his shoulder wrapped in cloth, his face pale, yet his eyes still burned with determination. The girl sat beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed the bandage tighter. "You saved me," she whispered. Her voice cracked with emotion. He gave her a weak smile. "No," he said softly. "We saved each other." Outside, the dogs circled the cabin, wounded but alive. Their howls rose into the night sky, a cry of victory, a warning to the forest. This pack was not broken. For days, the girl cared for the man. She cooked what little food they had, kept a fire burning, and cleaned his wounds. He often drifted in and out of sleep, but every time his eyes opened, she was there, watching, guarding. Her heart ached. Whenever she thought of how close she had come to losing him, the strangers did not return, not yet, but she knew they would. They wanted her, and they would not stop. Her memories were returning in pieces. She saw herself in chains, used as something more than a person. Forced to obey, her fists clenched whenever the images came. "I won't be their weapon again," she whispered to herself. One evening, as snow fell quietly outside, she sat near the fire with him. "You could have let them take me," she said softly. "You could have saved yourself." The man shook his head, his voice steady. "That's not who I am." He looked at her, his gaze deep. "And that's not who you are either." She lowered her head, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, she believed him. She was not a weapon. She was not a monster. She was someone who could be loved. The bond between them grew stronger. The girl laughed for the first time since the accident. A small sound, fragile yet beautiful. The man listened, and his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Together, they found moments of peace, gathering wood, cooking simple meals, even sitting in silence while the dogs rested at their feet. But danger still lingered. One afternoon, the girl spotted footprints near the cabin, heavy and fresh. She ran inside, her heart racing. "They're close," she whispered. The man stood, his jaw tightening. "Then we have to be ready." That night, they made a choice. They could not wait for the hunters to return. They had to leave. The man packed what little they had: food, blankets, and his old rifle. The girl looked around the cabin one last time. Her chest ached. This place had been her first home. The place where she had found warmth, but it could no longer keep them safe. The dogs followed as they stepped into the forest. The snow crunched beneath their feet. The moon lit their path. And though the night was cold, the girl felt warmth beside him. Every step forward was a step into the unknown. Yet she was not afraid, not anymore. As they walked, she touched his arm gently. "If they find us again," she said softly, "I'll fight." Her voice was steady, strong. The man looked at her, pride in his eyes. "You're not alone anymore," he told her. The days turned into weeks. They moved from place to place, always careful, always watching. But with each passing day, the girl felt stronger. Her body healed, her spirit lifted. She remembered more of her past, but instead of breaking her, it fueled her. She was not the same frightened girl who had once crawled in the dirt. She had changed, and through it all, the man stayed by her side. His presence was her anchor, his strength her shield. She loved him, though the word felt strange on her tongue. She loved him because he had given her something no one else had: choice. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, the girl stood on a cliff with him. The world stretched before them, endless and unknown. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I don't know where this road leads," she whispered, "but if you walk it with me—" "I don't need to know," he smiled, his hand brushing against hers. "Then we'll walk it together." The dogs howled behind them, their voices echoing into the sky. It was not the howl of fear or hunger. It was the howl of a pack, united. Strong, the girl breathed deeply, the wind brushing against her face. She had lost her memory. Her past, her family. She had lived like an animal. She had been hunted, but in the end, she had found something far greater than what she had lost. She had found love, and in that love, she had found her new beginning.